The plight of Nigeria, a world of oil, corruption, and desperate citizens. Nigeria is a land of promise in Africa, where oil is not just a valuable resource, but also the thirst of the world. As one of the largest oil-producing nations, Nigeria is like a king sitting on a gold mine. However, if you think that sitting on a gold mine means that people's lives are always filled with happiness and prosperity, you'd be wrong. Although the world flocks to Nigeria for its oil, internally, the situation is more complex than a crime thriller with thrilling chases and equally spectacular swindles. 1. Nigeria. An overview located in West Africa. Nigeria is bordered by Benin to the west, Niger to the north, Chad to the northeast, and Cameroon to the east. Nigeria's southern coast stretches along the Gulf of Guinea, giving the nation a strategic position in maritime trade and transport. With an area of over 923,000 square kilometers, Nigeria is the most populous country in Africa, known for its diversity in culture, language, and religion. Nigeria's terrain varies from coastal plains in the south, through tropical rainforests, to plateaus and deserts in the north. Before oil became its main source of income, Nigeria had a diverse economy and society. Kingdoms like Benin, Oyo, and Kanem-Bornu were centers of power and culture from ancient times, famous for their sculptures, trade, and architecture. These regions participated in trans-Saharan trade routes, dealing in gold, salt, and slaves. Going back a bit, during the colonial period, 1861 to 1960, when Nigeria became a British colony, the economy focused on agriculture. Crops such as cocoa, palm oil, and peanuts dominated the export economy. These products were not only important in international trade, but also laid the foundation for the pre-oil economic system. Oil was first discovered in Oloibiri, Bayelsa State, in 1956, marking a significant turning point in Nigeria's economic history. Currently, oil plays a central role, accounting for 90% of foreign exchange earnings and 60% of the national budget. However, oil has both brought benefits and created many challenges for the country. On the positive side, this resource has brought enormous revenue, helping to develop infrastructure and elevate Nigeria's position on the international stage, while creating millions of direct and indirect jobs in the oil and gas industry. However, oil has also left many negative consequences, such as the Dutch disease, which has caused the decline of agriculture and light industry due to over-reliance on oil. Oil exploitation has caused serious pollution in the Niger Delta, threatening the lives and livelihoods of local people. Although oil is an abundant resource, it has not brought significant benefits to the people. The main reason is rampant corruption in the government. Officials, instead of using national resources to develop the country, share oil contracts among themselves, leaving the people in poverty. Poor people, instead of waiting for development, seek to survive by stealing oil. They tap pipelines, extract oil, and sell it on the black market. This job is not safe. Many have lost their lives. But for them, it is the only way to have money to eat. In addition to corruption and oil theft, Nigeria also faces serious instability caused by armed groups, such as Boko Haram. These groups not only carry out terrorist attacks, but also disrupt the economy and create an insecure environment, causing international investors to hesitate. The government's inability to control these areas worsens the situation. Despite having all the conditions to develop strongly, from oil resources to a large and potential population, Nigeria has not been able to rise to become an economic power due to fundamental issues such as corruption, political instability, and prolonged conflicts. If these issues are not addressed thoroughly, Nigeria may continue to waste opportunities and fail to fully exploit its potential. 2. When oil appeared. When the first oil was discovered in 1956 in Oloibiri, Nigeria, The people hoped that this valuable natural resource would bring prosperity and sustainable development to the country. Many saw oil as a gift from God that could boost the economy, eradicate poverty, and elevate Nigeria to new heights. However, the reality was not entirely as expected. Oil has completely changed Nigeria's economic landscape, but the development it has brought has not been as rapid and sustainable as initially hoped. Since oil was commercially exploited in 1958, Nigeria immediately became one of the world's leading oil exporters. Initial production reached about 5,100 barrels per day, but in a short time, this production quickly increased to more than 2 million barrels per day in the 1970s. The Nigerian economy in this period experienced a dramatic breakthrough, with an average GDP growth rate of 6 to 8% per year. This helped Nigeria not only become one of the largest economies in Africa, but also led to the country joining OPEC in 1971. Revenue from oil contributed 90% of export earnings and 80% of national budget revenue, creating enormous financial resources. The government used this revenue to invest in infrastructure, urban development projects, as well as social programs to improve people's lives, especially in urban areas. Oil has truly become the main driving force, helping Nigeria escape its backward agricultural economy. Many rural areas, which had been heavily affected by poverty and deprivation, began to receive large investments to build essential infrastructure. Major cities such as Lagos, Port Harcourt, and Abuja began to develop strongly with new residential areas, commercial centers, and modern industrial facilities. During this period, many Nigerians saw marked improvements in their quality of life and job opportunities. However, development from oil did not last long and was not evenly distributed. As the oil industry became increasingly dominant, other economic sectors, especially agriculture, were neglected. Nigeria, once a major food exporter in Africa, gradually shifted from this position to becoming an importer. Policies focused on oil extraction caused the agricultural sector to decline. Farmers did not receive sufficient support from the government, and a lack of investment in rural infrastructure led to delays in developing arable land. At the same time, the penetration of international oil companies has greatly increased unsustainable land use and reduced much agricultural land. In addition, the Nigerian economy became overly dependent on a single resource: oil. When oil prices fell, or when oil production encountered difficulties, the Nigerian economy also suffered heavily. The government faced difficulties in maintaining budget revenues when oil prices on the world market fluctuated, causing budget deficits and foreign exchange shortages. This also affected economic and social development policies, increasing inequality and prolonging poverty in many rural areas and leading to countless consequences. 3. Environmental devastation. Excessive oil exploitation in Nigeria, especially in the Niger Delta region, has created extremely serious environmental consequences. The large oil fields in this area not only provide the main source of income for the country, but also are the main cause of serious pollution for many decades. Oil spills are a frequent and inevitable problem in the oil exploitation process. When these incidents occur, soil, water, and air are seriously polluted. The ecosystem, which was once rich and diverse in the Niger Delta region, is now degraded, with many animals and plants heavily affected. Aquatic species in the river and coastal areas have almost disappeared, directly affecting the livelihoods of millions of people. Clean water, an essential resource in daily life, has become a luxury for people in the area. Oil spills pollute water sources, making access to clean water more difficult than ever. This not only causes difficulties in daily life, but also seriously affects public health. Waterborne diseases, such as cholera and malaria, flare up, putting pressure on the weak health system in the region. Besides, agricultural land, the livelihood of many Nigerian families, cannot develop sustainably due to oil pollution. The land that was previously fertile is now barren, and it can no longer be cultivated. This makes it impossible for people, especially farmers, to maintain a stable life, and they have to face poverty. Moreover, during the exploitation process, oil and gas emissions from production facilities also pollute the air, causing respiratory diseases such as pneumonia and asthma. Areas near oil wells and refineries often suffer from heavy pollution, making the quality of life of residents here increasingly decline. Although oil brings huge profits to the government and oil companies, local people have to bear these terrible consequences without receiving adequate compensation. All these consequences are evidence of an unsustainable and irresponsible oil exploitation industry. While Nigeria continues to exploit this resource, the people and the environment here are paying a heavy price for the lack of management and protection of natural resources. 4. Over-reliance on oil. Although Nigeria has the largest economy in Africa, the country is facing a serious problem: over-reliance on oil. Approximately 90% of export earnings and 60% of the Nigerian government's budget come from the oil sector, which creates an undeniable dependence on this resource. However, this dependence on a single resource makes the Nigerian economy extremely vulnerable to fluctuations in the global market. When world oil prices fall sharply, the Nigerian economy is immediately hit hard. Businesses in the country and the government are struggling with income shortages, leading to budget cuts and affecting infrastructure development projects and public services. The oil price crisis of 2014 to 2016 was a typical example. During this period, the sharp drop in oil prices caused the Nigerian government to face a serious budget crisis, causing millions of people to fall into poverty. In addition, the lack of diversity in the economy has limited Nigeria's ability to develop sustainably. Sectors such as agriculture, processing industries, and other fields have not been invested sufficiently and have not developed evenly. This has led to the country not having enough industries to maintain long-term stability. While the oil fields continue to produce, other economic sectors do not have enough strength to replace them when the oil sector faces difficulties. In particular, agriculture, one of Nigeria's important sectors, has been neglected for many years. Although the country has great potential in agricultural production, the lack of investment and innovation in agricultural technology has made Nigeria's agricultural output unable to meet domestic demand, leading to the need to import food. This adds to the economic burden on the people while reducing the competitiveness of the national economy. Therefore, to develop sustainably and reduce risks from dependence on oil, Nigeria needs to diversify its economy, investing in other sectors such as agriculture, processing industry, information technology, and renewable energy. This is a long but necessary road if Nigeria wants to escape its dependence on oil and create a more stable and sustainable economy in the future. 5. Corruption. A systemic evil. If you think corruption is only a problem in poor countries, then perhaps you do not fully understand Nigeria. Here, corruption is not just a problem, but it has become a part of life. Government officials, from low to high ranks, can shake their heads and say, "If we don't corrupt, how can we live?" Corruption in Nigeria has almost become an official profession. From stealing public funds and receiving bribes to signing unjust contracts with foreign companies to share benefits. If this story were made into a film, it would surely keep you from closing your eyes due to its humorous and dizzying plots. One of the factors that makes corruption in Nigeria so serious is the lack of an effective oversight system. Officials are not afraid of being punished because they can manipulate the legal system and often receive protection from those in power. The legal system lacks transparency and is not strong enough to prevent corruption, leading to the serious degradation of functional agencies. Moreover, Nigeria's political system is strongly fragmented. Local leaders and their followers participate in sharing the benefits from oil fields, making corruption an indispensable part of the government's daily work. This makes ordinary people feel that they have no other choice but to follow the trend. All activities, from infrastructure development to licensing, must be associated with underground transactions, where bribery and secret agreements are normal. Government officials and large businesses often engage in unjust schemes, and receiving bribes or dealing with international oil companies is not uncommon. The Nigerian government admits the problem of corruption, but law enforcement is weak and lacks determination. A typical example is the case of former Nigerian oil minister Diazani Alison Madueke. She was accused of corruption and embezzlement of public funds up to billions of dollars. She was arrested in London in 2015 and faced multiple charges related to receiving bribes from oil companies, as well as participating in unjust deals. However, to this day, this case has not been fully resolved, and many people still believe that she will not be held truly accountable. Corruption in Nigeria is not just the action of individuals, but has become a system protected by vested interests. Corrupt officials not only benefit themselves, but also help related private and international companies. This corruption network is becoming increasingly complex and difficult to break, as it is protected by the power and interests of those with great influence in the government and large companies. This creates an environment in which wrongdoing is not only tolerated, but has become an indispensable part of the country's operating mechanism. The issue of corruption not only seriously affects the Nigerian economy, but also pushes the country into a vicious circle of poverty and injustice. The government does not have enough motivation to change, because corruption is the source of income for many people in power. Meanwhile, the people continue to live in poverty, with no choice but to live according to the way the government has set up, despite knowing that it only leads to the degradation of society. 6. Oil theft, an unofficial occupation. Amid widespread corruption and severe deprivation in many poor areas of Nigeria, people have to find every way to survive. One of the most notable forms of survival, although frightening, is oil theft. It may sound like a plot in a dramatic action movie, but in reality, it is an unofficial occupation that many people, from farmers to gangs, are involved in. This is how they make a living, even though they know that it always comes with danger and heavy consequences. With abundant oil resources, but due to poor management and government corruption, people in oil-producing areas, especially the poorest areas, do not receive any benefits from this resource. People living in rich oil regions have to endure poverty and lack basic infrastructure. While oil companies and people in power reap huge profits, the people can only find ways to make a living by stealing oil. Illegal oil extraction has become part of the informal economy, where thousands of people participate every day. Every day, thousands of people, from poor farmers to organized gangs, try to infiltrate the oil pipelines of large companies. These pipelines are hundreds of kilometers long, running through dangerous areas. But this is the only way they can earn a little from the oil. Thieves not only face danger from armed groups, but also have to avoid being pursued by security forces and oil companies that are protecting their assets. This makes the job a dangerous game, where every step carries the risk of death. Oil theft may not be surprising to the people of Nigeria, but for those who have never witnessed it, this is surely a shocking reality. One can easily imagine groups of thieves secretly infiltrating oil pipelines, using manual equipment to extract oil and disappear without a trace. This may lead anyone on the outside to think that they are watching an action movie about bold and dangerous incursions. These gangs operate like professional teams, quietly and quickly profiting from valuable resources that the people here are never allowed to enjoy. It's not just a simple act of robbery, Oil theft has become a profession, a means of survival that people in poor areas must accept. However, their recklessness not only puts their own lives in danger, but also creates a series of serious problems for the national economy. Oil theft not only causes a loss of national assets, but also creates an illegal oil market, where companies and governments cannot control the amount of oil extracted. This leads to a shortage of revenue from oil, which prevents Nigeria from developing infrastructure and improving the lives of its people as they should be able to. Although the Nigerian government has made efforts to prevent oil crimes, rampant corruption makes these measures almost ineffective. A part of government officials is involved in corruption cases in the oil industry, making it difficult to control and regulate oil theft. In fact, it is the weakness in management that has left people with no choice but to engage in illegal activities to make a living. If there were an Oscar award for action movies about oil, Nigeria would surely win without a rival. These oil thefts, with their daring incursions and dangerous actions, are an indispensable part of the daily lives of poor people in Nigeria. However, behind those breathless scenes is a sad story of a country besieged by corruption and injustice, where national resources are not used to develop the country, but only serve a small group of people in power. 7. Conflict and violence. The oil industry in Nigeria is not only an important economic driver, but also a root cause of serious conflicts, especially in the Niger Delta region. Although this region has abundant oil resources, the benefits from the oil industry are not shared fairly, leading to deep dissatisfaction in the local community. The people, especially those living near oil fields, often have to endure the negative impacts of oil exploitation without receiving corresponding benefits. When the wealth from oil mainly falls into the hands of international oil companies and the ruling class, the people's resentment increases, and they begin to react strongly. Protests, riots, and armed attacks have become common forms of resistance. Armed groups and insurgents have not hesitated to attack oil facilities, disrupting production and causing huge damage to the industry. These attacks are not only aimed at demanding justice for the local community, but also reflect the failure to share the benefits from oil resources fairly and sustainably. These actions often create insecurity and violence, making the Niger Delta region a conflict hotspot. The presence of international oil companies in the region has exacerbated the situation. These companies, for profit, not only ignore the rights of the people, but also cooperate with the government to maintain control over oil resources. At the same time, armed groups have taken advantage of this instability to increase their activities, creating a never-ending cycle of violence. These conflicts not only increase violence, but also cause great damage to the Nigerian economy. The loss of assets and infrastructure caused by these attacks has caused Nigeria to lose a large portion of its oil revenue. Moreover, the violence and insecurity reduce investment from international companies, weakening the country's economy. These conflicts also cause the government to spend more on military and security operations, instead of investing in social development and infrastructure. Finally, the inequitable distribution of oil benefits, combined with the involvement of armed groups and international oil companies, has created an unstable environment that not only affects Nigeria's sustainable development, but also has serious consequences for the country's security and social stability. 8. Impact on public health. Excessive oil exploitation in Nigeria has not only caused negative impacts on the environment, but also has a profound impact on public health, especially in oil-producing areas such as the Niger Delta. Toxic substances from the process of extracting and processing oil, including chemical compounds and emissions, have entered people's living environments, creating a significant risk to the health of the community. One of the most serious problems people face is respiratory diseases. Emissions from oil wells, extraction processes, and processing facilities often contain toxic compounds such as sulfur dioxide, SO2, and carbon monoxide, CO, causing problems with the lungs and respiratory systems. People living near oil exploitation facilities are easily infected with these substances through breathing polluted air, leading to diseases such as pneumonia, asthma, and other respiratory problems. In addition, water pollution is also a serious issue. Oil and chemicals from the exploitation process easily infiltrate groundwater sources and rivers and lakes in the area. This not only pollutes drinking water sources, but also harms irrigation and agricultural production. Polluted water has caused many communities to experience health problems related to digestion and infection. Diseases caused by water pollution, such as diarrhea, cholera, and other infectious diseases have increased, especially in rural areas where people depend on river water for their lives. Another serious impact is the increased risk of cancer. Toxic chemicals in oil, when exposed for a long time, can cause cancers, especially skin and lung cancer. Communities living near oil facilities, where the level of air and water pollution is very high, have to endure health risks that many people cannot foresee. The situation of environmental pollution and negative impacts on public health is not only a problem of one generation, but it can also extend through future generations. The polluted environment makes people not only have to face diseases, but also have to endure a difficult, deprived, and risky life. 9. Why things don't change. Are you probably wondering why these problems persist without being resolved? The reason is that the political and economic system in Nigeria lacks stability and real motivation for change. The government, although aware of the problem, does not have enough determination and ability to intervene deeply in the fight against corruption. In part, because the benefits from corruption are so great for those in power that they can maintain their position and wealth. Government officials can embezzle public funds, receive bribes from businesses, and sign unjust contracts with international companies to share benefits. Therefore, instead of changing, they continue to maintain and protect this system, even though it seriously harms the country. Meanwhile, people in poor areas of Nigeria have no choice but to find ways to survive in an environment full of difficulties. To make a living, some people have turned to stealing oil from oil pipelines. This is not an act stemming from recklessness or criminal intent, but the only choice for survival in a context of poverty and deprivation. In addition, with a political system in which corruption has almost become an official occupation, people cannot expect significant changes from functional agencies. In addition, a factor that cannot be ignored is the lack of strong intervention from the international community. International oil companies are present in Nigeria to exploit resources, but they do not pay attention to the social and environmental situation of this country. Although they benefit from Nigeria's oil resources, there are no strong measures to address corruption, improve the living conditions of the people, or protect the environment. These companies seem to only focus on profits and ignore the negative impacts on society and local communities. Therefore, despite international interest in Nigeria, the problem of corruption and oil exploitation continues to persist without a truly effective solution. Conclusion: Nigeria is a country full of potential, but it's like a gift that when you open it, you only see so many problems. Oil, which is seen as a valuable resource, is the root of countless problems. Corruption is rampant, people have to steal oil to live, while officials continue to be obscure and share the pieces of the national economy. If one day you want to understand what it means to have the art of living in poverty and the talent of corruption, come to Nigeria and you will see everything become clear.